Today, we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Forbes Field Green. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Birmingham Pen Company's Forbes Field Green is a green ink. And to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Retro 51 with a broad nib to take my notes for this video. Before we get to the writing samples though, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done, and what we see is this blue across the bottom, a yellow that comes in, and then a very bright blue across the top. Now these two blues don't look like they're the same at all, which makes this a rather complex mixing for this ink. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And that line across the bottom is much more permanent. It makes me feel like this ink might have a little bit of hold on. Now we see that darker blue, we see the yellow come in, and we see more of that really bright blue across the top. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let my smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it seems to take the highlighter perfectly well. It doesn't have any problems where it feathers or spreads out or becomes illegible, so I would use this with confidence in a note-taking situation. Water reactivates and lifts up the darkest parts of the ink, only leaving some of the blue that makes up this ink. And I'm going to comment right now on the swab because it's very interesting to see the greens, turquoise, and some of the really dark, almost to the point of black greens that we can get from this particular ink. Back to removing it. Pen Flush does everything that water does, just a little bit more. We start to see some of the white of the page coming through in little spots on the Pen Flush. This leaves me hope that Flush is all that would be needed to remove this from your pen. Now bleach, as would be expected, is completely removing it from the page and leaves that familiar, almost kind of yellow staining behind that sometimes happens. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Forbes Field Green has a viscosity of 2.8, which makes it normal. It's the higher side of normal, but it is normal. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and I always have to point it out with the Birmingham pens, or with their samples. Get a really ink-safe environment to open this up. It's messy, and that's all I'm going to say on it. I'm not going to beat the hell out of them on it. I feel like I've done that too much, and if I ever go to Pittsburgh, they're going to corner me and just pound me into dog meat, I feel like. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It's a lovely shade of green with the 1.1. The extra fine, it becomes a darker tone slightly. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does offer some very nice color variation, but the tone being darker makes the color variation a little harder to see. 7 seconds to dry. Again, a noticeably darker tone on the medium with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and we get no shading here. No shading here at all. 13 seconds to dry. Scrubby for the extra fine shows us some color variation, and we did get color variation. Scrubby for the medium shows us none, and we did not get any. Smear test says you can likely recover this. So, Tomoe River. Tomoe River offers no bleeding. Yes, it has ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. I don't care for how this green looks on this paper. The extra fine, same tone of green with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 11 seconds to dry. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 20 seconds to dry.
The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. And the smear test, I don't think you would be able to recover this if you smeared it. Rhodia paper. Rhodia gives no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does offer little bits of shading throughout. Little bits. It just starts to come through here. Extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, but it does offer some beginnings on color variation. Okay, quick is a darker tone, and then it gets much darker at the K. Lazy is much darker, but it gets even darker on the Y. Over being a dark tone, but the E is an even darker tone. 8 seconds to dry. The medium, noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shading whatsoever in this writing. 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby, the extra fine, shows us a little bit of color variation. It actually shows much more than we got in the writing sample. The medium shows no color variation at all, and we didn't get any color variation. And the smear test makes me feel like you could recover this. So I took my notes with a, and I didn't write it down. Took my notes with a Retro 51 with a broad nib. And it's the same tone that I got with the medium. All the same performance. So on a wetter pen, you're going to get some of the same consistent performance. And that can be a very good thing. So I tested this out on Franklin Christoph paper. Franklin Christoph gave us no bleeding. I don't count where it looks like it's coming through on a scrubby. That's stupid thick. Gave us no ghosting. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Nope. Extra fine. A little bit darker tone. No feather, spread, halo, sheen. There are spots of it being darker, spots of shading, like the K in quick. The T in the is a little lighter. Brown starts dark, gets a little lighter, gets darker again. So we do get some of the hints of shading, which we don't always get a lot of on this paper. And 6 seconds to dry. Now a noticeably darker tone is the medium. Now the medium is giving me feathering. A lot of little feathering all over the place. And I don't expect that of Franklin Christoph paper. But there's a ton of little feathers all over the place. I'm going to go ahead and call it distracting because I know what I'm writing on and I'm disappointed with it. There is some spread. There's no halo, sheen, or shade. It took 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine showed us some color variation. We did get some color variation. The medium shows us none. We didn't get any. The smear test says you can recover this if you smeared it. So I'm looking at the Elon job notebook. It's not really made for fountain pens, so that's, I don't have the highest expectations on it. It's really there for roller balls and or gel pens and pencil. So the bleeding is not too bad. It does not touch the page underneath. It does make the back of the page unusable. There is a lot of show through. The top written with 1.1 has feather, has spread, has no halo, no sheen, and no shade. The extra fine has feather, it has spread, it has no halo, no sheen, and no shade, and it only took 1 second to dry. The medium has feather, it has spread, it has no halo, no sheen, no shade. It only took 2 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. And the smear test says if you're using this notebook and smeared, you would be able to recover it. And that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Forbes Field Green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, it's a green, but it's a very, very dark green. So I didn't want any super dark colors to go with it, but I liked red with green. I chose Private Reserve's Dakota Red because it fit just those categories on the red ink I wanted. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Forbes Field Green? Well, when you're writing with it, it doesn't look green when it's going down, and it dries a bit more on the green side, you sort of have to write and judge for yourself. But I feel that it's so dark, it doesn't really give me the green in the writing samples that I would like to have seen. Again, I put that as judge for yourself. But when you do get the greens from it, which do come up, they're a dusty green, which is not a bad thing. I think it's a very interesting color, very interesting tones. I think this might take more experimenting with, perhaps with a dry oblique nib, would give me the green and the shading that I would like for this ink, but I haven't gotten to that part of it yet. Thanks for watching.